Hello and welcome to Tiny Desk Knitting with Emma. Today the light is not great because it's daylight savings, so it's like not as light in the mornings as it was yesterday. And it's very early because I like to do these videos in the morning before my roommates wake up on the weekends. Drinking coffee today because it's very early. This mug is from Anthropologie. I get a lot of their initial mugs because I really like a monogram, B for Barnaby Knits. I think I got this one a few years ago. I have an E as well. And they, this is chipped, so, frequently I have to replace them. Not frequently, I'm not that bad with my mugs, but I do drop mugs sometimes. I dropped a mug at work recently that was one of my knitting mugs. But that's okay. There's lots of knitting mugs. I have a lot of mugs that say like, knit fast, die warm, or like I knit so I don't kill people and stuff. I like to bring them to work because I like people to know that if they don't let me knit, I'll kill them. No, that's not true. I like my job a lot. I would never do that. Wow, it's already chaotic start and we're a minute and 30 seconds in. It's usually how my life goes. Okay, today I'm going to talk about something that I just made in the last couple of days, which are this little pair of mitts and the Ukrainian flag colors. So, I don't think I've talked about this on my channel yet because I usually film a week or two ahead and don't always like have things planned out that far in advance or like predict what I'm going to be knitting on. But I did give up new cast-ons for Lent. There's some like loopholes in that because I have to keep making socks. So when I finish socks, I can cast on new socks because I'm doing my sock challenge this year where I have to keep knitting socks all the time. But the point was not actually like my cast-on like hiatus that I did from the middle of January to the middle of February. That was because I had too many projects on the needles, and it was important for me to kind of take stock of every project and be like, do I really want to keep knitting this, or is this something that I should frog, or maybe I should do, take another tack with this and rip part of it out and change whatever. Like, is it bringing me joy, and do I want to keep knitting it? But that was because it was just like the sheer volume of whips was just kind of like overwhelming. So this was more about like, okay, it's Lent. I like to give something up for Lent. Different like groups of Christians, depending on groups, is such a loose word. Different denominations and different people within those denominations have different relationships with Lent. So some folks give up the same thing every year. Sort of on principle. Some folks give up like a different thing every year. Sometimes folks take on Lenten discipline. Some people use Sunday as a feast day, so they don't observe their Lenten discipline or fast on Sundays and other feast days like Saints' days. There's a couple of major feasts in Lent that you're supposed to feast on and not do your Lenten discipline, but that's more of a sort of Catholic tradition, and I'm Episcopalian, so there's like some parts of the Catholic tradition that come into play. I think probably most of our traditions are based in Catholicism, and then most people who more frequent people who are Protestants will observe all of Lent as one entity. And yeah, my mom never knew that you could feast on Sundays until a nun told her, for instance, and she was at a retreat at a convent, I think some years ago, and she and somebody else from her church had both given up alcohol for Lent, and it was Sunday, and the nuns were like, you have to have a drink, it's Sunday. They were like, okay, I guess we have to have a drink because it's Sunday. So anyway, the reason I gave up new cast-ons for Lent was because I wanted to actually take time to like enjoy and think about the products that are on my needles because I'm trying to be more intentional with my knitting. So whether it's a really special yarn that's on the needles or whether I'm knitting it for somebody that I love or any of those things, I kind of want to be I don't want to feel rushed. I want to feel like I'm really in a project, and I can kind of give my whole self to a project. And I've noticed a change in the way I actually do my knitting. It's sort of like, instead of just switching from one thing to the other more frequently throughout the day, I'll kind of pick one project and stick with it for like that whole evening or that whole day, or even sometimes that whole weekend. Last weekend I knit nothing but socks for almost the entire weekend. So I tend to kind of have a whole day with a project at a time. And I really like that, because then you can really see an amount of progress that you've made, instead of just like kind of haphazardly knitting on whatever you want, and then sometimes things get finished and sometimes things sit for 2 years. So I just thought it would be nice to do that. So I broke my cast on fast because I wanted to knit something in support of people from Ukraine. And I thought that this was because the whole point of this is to be more intentional about my knitting and to like find more meaning in my knitting. I figured this counted as fine. I could have casted it on Sunday, which I didn't. I casted it on a Friday night because I wanted to have it done, because today is Sunday. So I kind of just like knocked these out yesterday, and I finished about half of one of them on Friday night, and then I knocked the rest of them out yesterday. Once again, I'm a pretty fast knitter, so. And we didn't have a lot to do. My roommates and I didn't have a lot to do yesterday. It was snowing, so we did walk to a brewery. That was fun. I should also talk about what I'm wearing. I'm gonna distract you with my mittens if I keep my hands up there though. This is the rose hip cardigan, or it's not a cardigan, I made it into a cardigan. It's the rose hip sweater by Anna Johanna from Strands of Joy, which is her book. Oh, it's right here. I did bring it down. Here it is, this book. It's a color work book. It's hard to read it because of the lighting. The letters are gold. There you go, you can read it on the side. It's published by Lina just over a year ago. It's really good. Lots of cool stuff in here. Even if you don't, you look at through the patterns. One thing I'll say about, if you get a whole book of like a designer's patterns, you don't have to knit all of those patterns. You don't have to, be expected to knit any of those patterns. You can be inspired by the beautiful photography, some of the yarn combinations. You can be inspired by like the patterning within the sweaters, and kind of add those to your own pattern library as a resource for your own things that you make if you want. If you, like me, like to knit off the cuff. But I think it's also great for yarn suggestions. And one thing that so the actual piece in this book, the rose hip cardigan, is knit and spin cycle yarns, and it's very low contrast. But for something that's so like intricate, I really wanted a high contrast. So I used John Arbon Yarnadelic, which was a suggestion from this book that she used for a different sweater. And I had one skein for my Woolly Thistle selection box in Le Fleur, which is like a pinky purple kind of mauve. And I actually frogged a sweater that I didn't really like that was knitted Juniper Moon Patagonia, because I wanted to make this. I thought it would go nicely with the John Arbon Yarnadelic, and it did. And I really like this sweater. I will say that I always think that I need fewer buttons than I do. And so if I when I put this on, the button band kind of gaps, and it's a little bit, the bottom button band's a little too long, or one of them is a little too long. Maybe they're both too long. But regardless, I like this sweater, and it's fun. Be resourceful. Frog projects you don't like. That's one of the things that I'm trying to do more of in my knitting this year, because I don't want to knit things that, that don't bring me joy, I guess. So, let's talk about these mittens. These are just like a little fingerless cuff. I got my base pattern for these, and I also use this chart, the back chart from Demirkin Mitts by Alison Rendell from Shetland Wool Adventures Journal Volume 1. And if you want to see me talk about the construction in great detail, I actually did a shopcast for the Woolly Thistle in, I think it was my January shopcast for them. It's I'll link it in the show notes, but it's the Shopcast where there's a big interview with Kristen Drysdale from Scandiwork. And you should also, if you're gonna go watch my segment, you should watch the interview with Kristen because it's fantastic. And also you should always watch the Shopcast because it's just amazing. And it's really entertaining, and it's like it's a real nice way to spend a couple of hours every 2 weeks. This is volume 3, and I'm gonna show you a pattern of volume 3 later in this video. But this is what the journals look like. You can get them at the Woolly Thistle. You can usually get them from Shetland Wool Adventures Journal, 60 North Publishing, if you wanna get it shipped from Shetland, or if you're already living in the UK or in Europe or something, or anywhere else in the world where you can't order easily from the Woolly Thistle. But they stock it. I'm not sure if anyone else in the US stocks it, but I like to support the Woolly Thistle, so I'm gonna tell you to buy it there. Okay, I used 6 colors. Take this off so you can zoom in. So I did do a gradient, which you can, I mean, if you look from far away, you're like, oh yeah, there's different blues and yellows in there, but you might not be able to see exactly. The transition between this darkest blue and then this medium blue here is pretty hard to see, which is good, I like that. And then there's kind of the royal blue here. So I used 3 blues. These ones, like I said, they're really similar. But if you're doing, you know, something like this, they don't have to be like so similar that you can't tell, or so different that you can tell. This is your canvas. This is a thing that I'm gonna wear, and I actually really like enjoy the way that this turned out, because the brighter blue kind of pops, and I just think the effect is nice. So it doesn't, you know, when you're looking at colors for Shetland color work, swatch if you're not sure. Don't like write off a combination because it's either too high or too low contrast, like a background set with each other. Because these, now in this light you can see that this darkest one is not quite as dark, or is darker than this middle one, and then but this bright blue is obviously a lot brighter. So this color is 21 Navy, and I'm showing you a full ball because I had some amount of a ball left, but I used almost, like, I maybe had half a gram left of this color because I did it for the cuff, and I didn't do it for the inside of the cuff because it's hidden. So I was like, I'm just gonna use the yellow because I'm using a lot less yellow generally. And I use blue more often than I use yellow in Shetland color work, so I figured I wouldn't put the blue somewhere. And I also love the little peekaboo inside. You could do a lining in a really soft yarn as well, as long as the gauge was fingering weight. If you wanted to do like some sock yarn in there, even have some sock bits and bobs left over, again, it's hidden. It's because you're folding that over, so lots of options there. So this is 21 Navy, right? Already got off track. This is 135 blue. None of these are heathered shades, so makes it easy. This is 18, which is royal blue, I think. Yep. 21 Navy, 135 blue. It's somewhere in here. I think it's royal blue. We're gonna call it 18 royal. It's very bright. I really like this royal blue. These were all left over, including this one, which isn't actually left over, but the color of the ball that I used was from the cowl that I did a few episodes ago. It's called my Scandinavian cowl. No, I don't know what it was called. It's not my Scandinavian cowl like episode 9. It's like I used Selbu patterns to knit a cowl like a couple months ago. I'll link it down below. And it's like 2 grays and white and a bunch of blues with a pink pop. And all those were left over from that project. Yellow, I almost never use in my knitting, ever. But I have yellows. I have a variety of Shetland colors because I frequently will like add colors to my cart. If I'm getting Shetland wool for something, I'll just add a couple of extra balls and colors that I don't have, because if you buy a lot of Shetland wool at once, it can be expensive. But if you just get a couple, it's like, they're like $5.95 each, especially if you're abroad, and then they're even cheaper. But I chose 3. These are all, in this light, they look really quite similar. This one is, the darkest one is 92 Marigold. This one is 28, the middle one. 28 says Old Gold on the label. It looks a lot brighter. It's not that bright. It's kind kind of a muted gold. And then this also looks a lot brighter. This is shade 66. It's kind of like a muted pale yellow. If you actually look at, maybe they look bright here too. I think they look more muted if you actually look at them here. So I did not offset which blues I paired them with. I just paired the darkest with the darkest, the middle with the middle, and the lightest with the lightest. So that is how people will teach you if you ask, how do you line up your like colors and stranded work. And Shetland, like knitters from Shetland, like Hazel Tyndall and other folks who do a lot of teaching they'll tell you the best way to do that is actually to line up all of your, like, get all of your colors, and you want to split them in half into background colors and pattern colors. And you can, some people actually just do that by like looking at the colors in order of dark to light. And if you're not sure what's the order of dark to light, take a photo of them in black and white, or take a photo of them and then switch it to black and white ideally use your phone, like a smartphone, because most smartphones have a function where you can switch the camera to black and white, or you can switch the photo to black and white after you have taken the photo, because that will show you the gradient of the colors, like how saturated the colors are. And you will see which one is the lightest and which one is the darkest, and all in between. And you can like try lining them up in different combinations and seeing. But for me, I didn't think about that. I just thought about how blue is going to be the background color and yellow is going to be the pattern color. And then I lined them up in terms of the darkest yellow, the darkest blue, the medium yellow, medium blue, and then the lightest yellow with the lightest blue. So you can, if your colors are high contrast enough, you can go in the opposite order. Like these are so high contrast that I could have paired the darkest yellow with the darkest blue, and then, you know, the middles, and then I could have paired the darkest blue with the lightest yellow as well. So I've done that before too. It doesn't really matter as long as the contrast is to your liking and your preference. So yeah, do whatever you want, do your thing with those. But those were the colors that I used, and I think it's nice. I mean, I wasn't necessarily going exactly for the Ukrainian flag colors, but this blue would probably be the best shade, actually, the 18 Royal Blue. But I just wanted them to be blue and yellow. Yeah, so I thought about, I just thought about how I wanted something to wear. I didn't have any blue and yellow clothes. My mom's family is from Canada, and if you are from Canada, you probably know that there are a lot of Ukrainians living in Canada, and my grandmother is Ukrainian. So she grew up in Canada. She was born in Canada. She was born in a Ukrainian-speaking village in Alberta. And her mother, my great-grandmother Elizabeth, came to Canada in 1901 from Ukraine. The reason that so many Ukrainians came to Canada is because they were offered free land to farm in the prairies. So they had to kind of like save up enough money either before or when they got there to buy the things they needed to start a farm, like livestock and, you know, build a house and those kinds of things, and equipment. But the land was free. There's some I think there was like a kind of like sketchy deal where somebody paid somebody else, like for every Ukrainian that went to Canada, somebody got paid. But in the end, the Ukrainians were leaving because there were really high taxes, and the provinces that they came from, there were a couple of specific provinces, were getting really overcrowded, and they just didn't really have the land to farm anymore. And they were farmers, and so they went to Canada because they were offered farmland. It's really cold in Canada in the winters, really, really cold in the prairies especially. So the prairie provinces of Canada are kind of like over kind of Minnesota, Montana, Idaho, like the Dakotas. That's Manitoba. From east to west, it's Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, and they're long and they're pretty wide. Saskatchewan is actually shaped like a rectangle. The other two are not shaped like rectangles because Manitoba's got the bay on one side and Alberta kind of cuts across on one side. The Rockies go through Alberta. Both my parents grew up in the Rockies, but my mom grew up in the Northern Rockies in Alberta, and my dad grew up in Albuquerque near the Rockies in New Mexico. So that's fun. They met in graduate school. That's how they met. That's why we grew up in a place that was really far from both of their families. My brother and I grew up in Vermont because that's where my parents were working, and they still live there. But yeah, so my great-grandmother came from Ukraine with her family and had a ton of children, and almost all of them died because they were, except for the first one and then one in the middle, and then my grandmother, who was the youngest. She had a rare blood disease that she gave to them or passed to them through gestation, and because they were not able to get a transfusion when they were born, because they were born on a farm, they all died pretty quickly. And my grandmother was the last one who was born, and she was born in a hospital, so they could give her a transfusion. She was the only one born in a hospital. So yeah, it was a pretty hard life. They had a pig farm, and my grandmother moved to the city to live with her sister to go to school and learn English when she was a teenager. So she never speaks Ukrainian. I've occasionally heard her speak Ukrainian with my friends from college who are also Ukrainian, who speak Ukrainian. But she left. It was a really hard life. And there are a lot of Ukrainians in Alberta, especially in the prairies, or people who say, I'm Ukrainian. If you watch The Grocery Girls, for instance, they're Ukrainian. When they talk about how they have Ukrainian food at Thanksgiving, they say, we have pierogies and nachinka. Those are the same foods that my family eats on Thanksgiving. Nachinka is like it's like polenta. It's like cornmeal souffle. It's really good. My mom makes it Christmas at Thanksgiving usually. And yeah, so because my mom grew up with a lot of other Ukrainians or kids whose parents or grandparents were Ukrainian, maybe even third, fourth, fifth generation Ukrainian, she learned how to make Ukrainian food because people's grandmothers often lived with them and they would teach them. So she and her best friend Barb, who I think I got these buttons from. Barb is very cool. She lives in Toronto now, but she and my mom grew up together in Alberta. And I think Barb's Baba taught them how to make a bunch of the food that my mom and I make today. I make pierogies from scratch. Actually use dough and potatoes. It's really easy, but it's kind of high effort. And we make borscht and like kielbasa, which is garlic sausage. If you're Polish or you frequently eat Polish food, you've probably had that before. And like roast chicken with tons of garlic on it. Yeah, and we sometimes celebrate Ukrainian Christmas, which is Orthodox Christmas, is actually our Western Church's Epiphany. Well, Epiphany is January 7th, and that's Christmas, and so we usually celebrate Ukrainian Christmas on this. No, the Epiphany is the 6th. Yeah, that's Christmas Eve. Ukrainian Christmas Eve is Epiphany, and that's when it's celebrated. And in Ukrainian culture, because so much of it is about farming, the thing that you do on Christmas that's a special tradition is that you feed your animals first. And you feed your animals this special kind of grain, like soaked grains that's like really sweet kind of grains, and you have to eat some too. It's a tradition. Sometimes we do that in my family if we're feeling like putting in a lot of effort to Ukrainian Christmas. But yeah, we do all those things to carry on these traditions, and I think a lot about how my ancestors had to leave Ukraine because of certain types of hardships that they faced, and they were nothing like the things, I don't know, I wasn't there. There were lots of hardships that were faced by my ancestors in Ukraine. There was a lot of horrible things that had happened to them, obviously, as well, but it was nothing like what's happening today. So it's funny, I know so many people who are Ukrainian because they're from Canada and their ancestors all came from Ukraine, and I hardly know anyone who's actually been there or has had anyone in their family live there for many generations. But the culture stays alive so strongly in expat cultures, especially in Toronto, where the wealthy Ukrainians immigrated. So it's funny, when I moved to Toronto for university, a lot of my friends were also Ukrainian, but they still spoke Ukrainian. They went to Ukrainian church. They went to Ukrainian preschool. Their families were extremely tight-knit Ukrainians. Everybody married Ukrainians. And I don't know a lot about this, but what I was told was those are the wealthy Ukrainians who didn't have to farm. So they were much more proud to keep their culture alive in these ways in Canada, whereas in the prairies they were poor and they had to farm, and it really felt different. They felt like outcasts. They weren't always proud of where they came from because people treated them badly. So yeah, but the number of people I know who say I'm Ukrainian, there are Ukrainians everywhere. People are very proud of that heritage, and so am I. And I think it's really important to donate, to think about them. I won't be writing or selling this pattern because I used somebody else's base pattern for it, but I encourage people to make socks, mittens, hats, sweaters with these colors. Show your support for the people of Ukraine. I am going to talk briefly now about, that was a long tangent. I should have started with that. As we know, I never do anything in order. I'm going to talk a little bit about what books I used to design these. So I used American Mitts for this, basically for the shape and for the stitch counts, but I also used the pattern on the back. I could use a different pattern here. I like this one. I like the way it looks. So you knit this, you start here with the cuff, you cast on here, and you knit this cuff up from here, like that. You flip it inside out. You knit one round, which creates a purl ridge on the correct side because you're gonna flip it. You're gonna turn this one up. Then you do this big, long 2x2 rib inner cuff here. It's gonna be concealed because, boom, you fold this over. And then you knit the hand, back of hand. I made a little gusset. The pattern does include the gusset, but I make the gusset longer generally. I've used waste yarn for the thumb, and then I pick it up and knit. I knit about 10 1x1 ribbed rounds in the medium blue. Keep going, cast off in 2x2 rib. They're very quick, they're very easy, simple. I wouldn't call them super easy or simple. I've knit a lot of them, so I don't really think about the construction very much. Really nice way to try out different color palettes on a small scale to see if they'll work. Try out little motifs, all that kind of thing. So for the cuff, in the original pattern, I knew that it's 28 by 28. So I needed a multiple of 14 or 7 for this pattern, or 28. So if there's 56 stitches in the cuff. So I actually used the complete book of traditional fair isle knitting. There's, again, these pages will tell you how many stitches tall the patterns are. I think in the original pattern this is like 13 rows, maybe 11 rounds. This is a little longer because it's 15. And I frequently, like I have said before, will write in the margins the number of stitches, like horizontal repeat is, so that I can go back and find them. So I knew that this was 14 because I'd used it before. Oh, it's right here. It's this one, and I'd marked it. So I used that one. I did a couple of extra rounds of ribbing inside as well, because I'd done a couple of extra rounds on the cuff. For the back of the hand, I used my handy dandy Selby Mittens book. This was an easy pattern to replace because it was 25 by 25 on the original mitten, so I just had to find a square in here. It was 25 stitches by 25 stitches and completely replace the chart. I actually use a chart minder, what's a chart minder? I use an app. It's called Knitbird, and it's on my computer, and it's like you can fill in color work patterns and then save them as PDFs. You can use Stitch Master, you can use Microsoft Excel if you're super good at Excel. A bunch of my friends do that. But I use Knitbird, which is free. And you can also flip. There's a setting in Knitbird where you can mirror the image, so I only have to do one chart and then I just flip it so that I know where the thumb's gonna go on the other side, which is handy. So I did that for the back of the hand and this, and then I just have it on my laptop. That's how I like to do color work. It's because you can put a window above and watch Netflix, and then you can just scroll up one row at a time. Yeah, so this book's great. Lots of these patterns are in the public domain, which is great. But I just, if you're looking for something that's 25 and you have this book, just count the square. And again, I write things in. That one is 27. I could have probably used that one, would have been fine. Yeah, I think I used this one. There it is, 25. But I've knit a lot of these mittens, and so I use my books, I write things in the margins because if there's useful information in there, that's great. I'm gonna use that. And I actually also cast on a hat that I'm also gonna do in blue and yellow. This navy is not the same as this navy, but they're so close. This is Fennel Garn, Rama Fennel Garn in color 449, Farge 449, Party 233. And I'm gonna use the same yellows and probably these two blues as well. But there was more of this because of 50-gram ball. And I am knitting a hat from Shetland Wool Adventures Journal Volume 3, as promised. I'm gonna show you this. I think the gallery's in the front. The future is woolly. These have really cool articles in them about Shetland and recipes and a bunch of patterns. So if you're interested, you should check it out. Here it is. The Blosta hat by Amy Gare. I think there's a hat kind of like this by Jeanette Budge in the new Shetland Wool Week as well, the 2021 Shetland Wool Week annual. But I'm making that here. Let's see if there's another photo of it. Sorry. Here. Yeah, there's the schematic. I don't want to show you the pattern, but it's a little low contrast, but there it is. It's kind of oversized. I don't know if I'm gonna make a pom-pom, but I am gonna make a long folded brim and then just do some blue and yellow. Got oxos there. I think it'll be nice. But yeah, that about does it. I wanted to have something to wear, show my support for the people of Ukraine. And to encourage everyone to donate and do what you can. I think donations are best given to the Ukrainian Red Cross. I will link the link in the show notes to that webpage. Yeah, I plan to, when I eventually publish my sock patterns, to donate some of the money to Red Cross Ukraine as well, because that's nice to be able to donate money to people who need it more than you do. Yeah. Okay, I think that's it for today. I will update you with my hat when it is finished, but I wanted to show these and encourage you to make your own if that floats your boat. Again, if you want to learn more about American mitts, I talked about it in the one of the last shopcasts I did for the Woolly Thistle. So I will link that in the show notes too. And I hope that you have a great rest of your week. And all that. You can now find me on Twitter as well as Instagram and Ravelry. I should say this at the beginning, but my Instagram, Ravelry, and now Twitter are linked below. I'm a millennial and we like Twitter a lot. So I have like a regular Twitter account for me, but it's private. So, but I wanted to like participate in knitting Twitter. So I am on knitting Twitter now. It's Barnaby Knits. It's linked in the show notes if you're on Twitter and you want to follow me. So yeah, thank you for watching. This has been Tiny Desk Knitting with Emma. Bye.